All right, mates, welcome back. JL Scott Fishing and Eats is part two. Hope you caught part one. Part one, we talked really about the floats, kind of the topography, the kind of the layout here from Seneca Landing, really Algonquin down to Swains. And now we're going to talk about baits, okay? Obviously. That's the number one question I get about this section of the river, which is in my backyard. And I fish at least 3 times a week. Sometimes 5 times a week. And so I know it pretty well in all different conditions. And so it's the number one section, the number one section of the Potomac River outside of the tidal Potomac that I get questions posed to me about in the DMV. That's the District, Maryland, and Virginia. And then after Potomac would come Monocacy and Shenandoah. In our area, really, that we predominantly fish a lot. So other than the tidal Potomac, and this is the upper Potomac, okay? So it's above the fall line, same as the tidal James at Richmond, okay? Hits the fault line, and everything above that line in west of Richmond, going all the way out to Western Virginia, is really, it's a non-tidal fishery for smallmouth. Okay, doesn't mean there's no largemouth there, but it's predominantly smallmouth. And then the tidal Potomac is predominantly largemouth. Okay, the tidal James as well, predominantly largemouth. All right, so there you kind of have that, like the fault lines usually break the species. Okay, in terms of the population density, doesn't mean that there aren't smallmouths all over the river. There are. And there are largemouth. Okay. So we're just talking about population density. So you're really in this part of the river, you're targeting smallmouth. You're not necessarily targeting largemouth, though they do show up, especially at the mouths of creeks like Goose Creek, Monocacy, where the tribs kind of like those confluences in the mouths of different tend to where I come into contact with largemouth. So maybe they're resident largemouth. That's just the way it happens. The way the cookie crumbles sometimes when you're out on the river. So you're predominantly targeting smallmouth. And when you're targeting smallmouth in the summertime, especially in June, you are going to want to downsize bait profiles, okay? Doesn't mean you can't go large in order to catch that 19, 20, which do exist in this section of the river, though not nearly as prolific as other sections of the river I have found, say, above Harper's Ferry, above Dam 4, okay, and up towards Hancock and places like that, which I believe there's in the pendulum because of flooding and our watershed moments and big water events. We've had spawning classes that have been wiped out, okay, in this section of the river. And 18 is a prime example of that. So how long does it take for a bass to get to be 20 inches, which is a Virginia citation smallmouth, okay? And so it's taking longer in this section, okay, for us to see dense populations of those fish because spawning classes 5 years ago were wiped out because of the high water events of 2018. They would be 5 years old today, okay? And how big would they be at 5 years? They'd be 16, 17, 18 inches, okay? Every bit. And so that's how you kind of want to like understand, what am I fishing for? What am I targeting? What are my realistic expectations? Okay. Tons of fish in the 12 to 14 inch class range. They're younger fish post the 2018 high water events, in my opinion. We've had good classes. And so that population is a dense population. So we're seeing an upswing in the size fish that we're seeing now. Okay, so that's a good thing. We're seeing more grass, okay, especially on the Virginia side in this section of the river. Less grass on the Maryland side. The Maryland side tends to be a lot rockier, especially south, downriver of Pennyfield, okay? It tends to be more rocky, more sand gravel, pea gravel, rock gravel, shell beds, that kind of stuff on this side of the island as opposed to on that side of the island. It's just a matter of where everything directionally gets flushed with the main current, right? A lot of times. So in this section of the river, again, we have Old Dam number 2, a Canal Lock at Riley's Lock and Seneca Landing here. All right. And again, like I said earlier, above this, you're going to have deeper water. So it's definitely a better chatterbait, a better whopper plopper, a better spinnerbait, a really great tube fishing. You've got deeper water, all those particular baits up that. And I've had really great success on shiner pattern, darter pattern spinnerbaits. Okay. Willow, Colorado, to me, it's what your preference is. These have always been my favorite color patternation, colorations for the upper and for Susquehanna. Okay. I like the fact that this one is universal in a sense that I can throw this pattern in clearer conditions as well as in stain conditions. Okay. So it's got the white to it on the bottom. See that white, which is fine in clearer water, but it has that touch offset of brown, like a shiner would. If you look at that shiner head that's on there. Okay, if you can see that. This also works highly effective in current conditions right now. Okay, because it could be a little stained in some areas, clear in other areas. You're running that through. Okay, so that's a really, really good option. When we get to the muddier side, at the mouths of creeks, one of my favorite patterns is this pattern right here. Okay, go dark. Dark blades, match your blades, paint your blades, okay, to match your skirt patterns. On a lot of these, I'll keep the same bait. For example, this spinner bait I have in 3 length skirts. What does that mean? That means this is the medium, okay? I've got one with a longer skirt and I've got one with a shorter skirt, okay? Depending on what the depth of the water is I'm throwing in. That's how I like to do it, to kind of change the profile up on the spinnerbait action, okay, is cut my skirts a little bit, okay, especially for smallies. And I really love that short. You see that difference in there? Grab your spinnerbait, you catch this, and just take a look at your spinnerbait, whatever your branded spinnerbait is, and compare that angle of your spinnerbait to that angle. Okay, what I'm talking about this angle here and then that angle, and compare that. And if you're having issues with hookups with your spinnerbaits, and a lot of people have moved away from spinnerbaits to chatterbaits, right? Because of that, all right, a lot of times. So there's more like old timers like me still love to throw the spinnerbait over the chatterbait, okay? And a lot of your success rate is going to have to do with that hook. That is a smaller hook for a smallmouth mouth, okay, not to shake off as opposed to a bigger hook, right? Because people tend to throw spinnerbaits for largemouth and then they try to throw it for smallmouth and they basically shake that bigger hook off. I love that angle offset, okay, on my spinnerbaits. That's what I look for. If I go to an expo or I go to a show, that's what I'm looking for, okay? Because a lot of times you're not finding these on your big box store aisle with that short, compact profile. Both of these have that same compact angle offset. I love it. Okay. Check out Snagler Tackle. He's Snagler Tackle from Pennsylvania. Was in a lot of shows in the region. He's also got an online store. You can check Snagler Tackle out. They're natural series spinnerbaits. They're a little bit bigger than these. You could cut down the skirts to get to that right size, but they are phenomenal forage coloration patterns for this region. Okay. I would not recommend any other spinnerbait, to be quite honest with you, in terms of coloration, hookups, and strikes of what you're going to get based on the color patterns. John's got dialed in to the Susquehanna, the Allegheny, the Upper Potomac, places like that just are phenomenal fisheries for smallmouth. I don't think you need to go anywhere else for spinnerbaits. Okay. He also does a lot of other things. You can check it out at snaglertackle.com. So after the spinnerbaits, chatterbaits, and all that, if you're looking at, again, in this section, and we're going down below Old Dam Tube, Blockhouse Run, okay, Blockhouse Point's here. Elm Island is here. All down through here. I am downsizing. I'm going straight to smaller presentations, whether that be smaller jigs, okay? Very, very smaller profile jigs, all right? And normally with these, like the ones I have in my bag right now, I'll have this guard completely cut down. Okay, I haven't cut these down yet, but I'll cut it down, this weed guard down to about like a 1/4 inch. Why? Because I don't really need a weed guard. Okay, like in a lot of these places. And these don't really get set because of the head. These don't tend. I don't find that this presentation gets caught in the rocks as much. Could just be the angle of that hook. Could just be me. But I'm not really having any issues with this style jig. You can kind of see that. I'll fold that back so you can kind of see the head colorations matching up with the crawl pattern called brown orange pattern, little crawl trailer on there. But I love these two in my section, and that catch me a lot of fish is a chartreuse. You can always change out the colorations. Add these hair, okay? So these are like from hair jigs, okay? You can go to your trout guy, you can go anywhere at a store, get marabou, you can get whatever kind of hair, guys that tie flies or any of that stuff, and you can incorporate that into your presentation. And here's the difference between that and say silicone, and that and say your regular jigs, right? That are just that, is they actually have a different propensity for the water. Okay, so they influence a lot of other things like buoyancy. They listen to a lot of other things in terms of, how the water reacts with hair versus, say, a silicone. Okay, that you may find in normal jigs that you'll buy at a big box store. I love the chartreuse. If you can find chartreuse, grab it. It's probably the most in demand. Okay, or you can get a white and paint it. Spray paint it or some kind of paint. I know guys that do that because they can't find that lime green chartreuse because the bass see that, okay? And the other one, of course, is red, okay? Both those, perfect. All right, again, under 3 feet conditions, you can still throw these kind of jigs, okay? Now, they're not nearly as prevalent in terms of catching. Let me show you a jig I use more on the title, but I've slowly started to incorporate it above Seneca Landing when I want to throw a jig in 4 or 5 feet of water in a pool. And that's this one right here. See how still has yellow, but it's pumpkin green, yellow, okay, and it's got a trailer on it, okay? So that's a bigger profile when I know or I think bigger. I've seen it. Because remember, a lot of times the water is clear, okay, than in other parts of the river. So you can see a 16 to 18. You can see an 18. You can just see it. And they usually move in groups of 3 to 4, okay, when they're moving around. They're roaming around. It's always 3 and 4 or 1. That's just usually, you never see 2 together, okay, in my opinion. Okay, unless you're talking about pre-spawn, like right before spawn. But for the most part, you see them in groups of 3 to 5, or you don't see them at all, or you see one solitary bass. And when you see that one solitary fish, it's almost always a big one. It's almost above 16 inches. So then I like to have a bigger style jig. And then I throw these jigs on the Tidal Potomac all the time. This just happens to be one I'm packing out for the upper because I like that color. On the Tidal Potomac, obviously we go black and blue. We use a lot more blues in colorations like that, and pumpkin, green pumpkin, watermelon candy type. Not so much, this, but I've had success with this, a little bit too in a particular creek down there. I don't know why it is. It's been effective in that creek as opposed to others, but it must be mirroring something. And then to piggyback that, and in the chatterbait, kind of like the same with a really larger profile on it. Okay. For down in the tidal area. Okay. Usually I'm not throwing that in the upper Potomac myself. If I am, okay, water rises, we get settled back at 4 feet. The water level on the river is then at cresting at 4 feet, and we're going to stay at 4 feet for a week or two, we think. Then I'm going to come through there. and I will opt for a chatterbait. Okay. Okay. I will opt for a chatterbait in this pattern with a copper blade and then white are really the only two that I throw. White, and I will throw one with white with some chartreuse in there. I don't know if you can pick that up. The coloration probably can't pick that up. Let me see if I can get a little. See that yellow in there, a little bit of yellow in there. Really, there's a highly effective chatterbait coloration on the upper Potomac mates if you that. And I prefer. I know a lot of people hate on it. I get it, but again, I'm old school. Okay, I've been fishing for a long time. I'm 52. I'm not a young buck. I know the young bucks don't throw grubs anymore. They've moved on to all the Z-Man stuff and the ticklers and all that stuff. It's great. I understand how that goes, but I'm still a grub guy. Okay, because they catch fish. It's like tubes. People hate tubes. People hate Ned rigs. Okay, they just catch fish, mates. Like smallies, they just catch fish. And so when I do want to do that, I'll throw that, especially if I'm going Algonquin Park and I'm going up. If I'm going upriver, I love that. Okay, you hear me say chatterbait. You see my sweatshirt. Chatterbaits are for cheaters. You'll be able to get that on the website pretty soon. But it's a joke. Okay, obviously I know chatterbaits are not for cheaters. It's like the same people that knock on Ned rigs. I just knock on chatterbaits because everybody and his brother throws it. You go to a particular event and the guy's got 12 rods. 6 of the rods have 6 different chatterbaits tied on. It's just the way we are. It's the way it is. Everybody it's a copycat. It's a copycat passion. You know what I'm saying? So staying with the jigs, I love these jigs. Okay. You absolutely, I'm going to try and do a feature here coming up. Hopefully I can get down and get to the bait maker shop studio and we could just cover these jigs because these jigs are just freaking bass catchers. Okay. And I'm not saying that lightly. Okay. I mean like 30, 40 smallmouth bass, Monocacy, Upper Potomac, Susquehanna. I can't wait to get up Susquehanna in August. I really can't with these baits. Okay. I know the guys going up there in August are going to be throwing the chatterbaits. They're going to be throwing all that. I'm going to be throwing right here. These jigs right here all day long. Look how small and compact that is. This is by definition a easy meal for your smallmouth bass. Simple as that. They are not going to not. If they're in the area, if they're even remotely within the area, okay, and they're coming across this, you're working this, they are not passing this baby up. They will absolutely annihilate this bait. Okay? And now, look at that color pattern. Again, and you guys are thinking like, why do we throw white, right? We throw white spinnerbaits. We throw white chatterbaits, right? White, right, is a predominant, accepted color. If you look for any colors, give me 3 colors that you need river fishing. White, green pumpkin, maybe watermelon candy, or black and blue, right? Those are your 3 you're going to get from anybody that you ask, right? If you could only have 3 or 4 colors, that's what they're going to tell you, okay? At least it's been my experience. Shoot up in the comments. Hit me up in the messages if you think I'm crazy, okay? So why not throw a little white in with a swim jig or a jig, okay? Doesn't matter what kind of jig you're fishing. Everybody goes black and blue and green pumpkin and all that. What I've noticed, at least with smallmouth, in these river systems in our region, a little bit of white goes a long way at enticing a lot of strikes. So these 2 right here are basically the same, okay, in terms of compactness with the hook. All right, small trailer on there, okay? And a lot of people would call these micro jigs. That's kind of like the industry micro jigs. I don't care what they call them, okay? I call them freaking smallie catchers is what I call them, okay? And they're small, okay? And a lot of people won't throw small baits. It's like Ned rigs. They won't throw them, okay? They're just like, I'm not throwing that, blah, 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 okay? But it comes to, you want to catch fish or not, okay? Because smallies are erratic, temperamental creatures, but aggressive by nature. Okay? And so these just become easy, what I call the predation factor. They are predators, and these are easy prey for them versus, okay, something like this. It's bigger, okay, that they may look at and be like, I'm not trying to tackle that, okay? So just keep that in mind, all right? And then we're going to move on to my favorite, okay, in terms of bass catching on the rivers. Does not matter what the weather, what's going on with the water level. Doesn't really matter what's going on with the clarity, and that's going to be your trusty old. Okay, that's perfect coloration for what you want to look for. Okay, it's a combination hair, jig, Ned, rig. Okay, change it up. What's that? What's that you say, Jay? Yeah, that's a grub. Okay, as opposed to most people be like TRD. Most people are like buying into all those trends, right? Okay, so everybody's throwing that. Come in behind them and throw with a little bit of different presentation with a grub and watch what happens. Okay. Remember, your bass get conditioned. Conditioned. Looks like we got a storm rolling through again this afternoon. Awesome. So the river's gonna change again, mates. Here's another one I love. Look at that. Look at that combination. This is where you combine your trout guys with your smallie guys. Guys that fish for smallmouth in these creeks and these streams and all that around Western Virginia, Western Maryland, and places like that are fly fishing. This is when talking to those guys, you can create baits for your spinning gear, okay, that just slay them, okay? And so here, I got a black one. Here are the two right here. Here's just a black hair jig that works. I predominantly love to throw this in the fall, but it works too in the summer. It's got that gold, so it's got a little flash to it, okay? Whereas this one does not have any gold, but it's got the grub on there, right? Nice little tail on there, okay? Now, you can also do this. Just switch out your trailer and throw a paddle tail. Throw a 2-inch paddle tail, okay? If you want that swim bait type action, all right? All through this section, down through here, you've got a lot of skinny water, a lot of shallow water that feeds a little deeper 2.5, 3 foot pocket or pool or a little cut or a little like indention kind of in the rock, the way the rocks have formed, or you've got a rock that goes like this, it rises above, but it comes down and curls, right? Because the water has kind of taken it over time, right? So it goes in like this, and underneath it, there's water underneath the rock for like 2 feet, okay? And you drop that down in there because those bass, especially the big ones, are sitting under that rock in kind of cooler water, shaded from the sun, waiting to ambush stuff. Doesn't need to be any bigger than this, mates. And it works, okay? Then you've got where you can use the tube, okay? Experiment in your fishery, mates. I cannot stress this enough. Experiment in your fishery. What's going to work? Play around with your tubes. Cut your tube lengths. Cut your tentacles a little bit longer or shorter. Find out what works. Switch out your trailer. Something like this or something like this. Okay? Right? Go smaller. This is a freaking Monocacy River killer. Okay? I can slide this right on something with a matching color like this. Have that tail on there. I can cut this down. I can cut this down if I want to cut it down. Take it off. Roll with this. I mean, there's so many things that you can do. If you want a little bit of weight, because you want to be able to get it out if you're wade fishing maybe or even on the kayak and you want to get it out. There are definitely things that you can do, or you can just throw that on there and fly it out there just like that. Okay? Go weightless, fly it out there just like that, and let that thing almost work like a fluke. Okay? And that'll work. And speaking of flukes, right there. Okay? I'm telling you right now, this is a cranberry coloration pattern. If you've got pink fluke, okay, anything like that, white, silver ghost minnow, perfect. Again, easy meal. Or in a darker version, different kind of tail. Okay, go with that kind of tail or vertical tail, depending on what your preference is that you got there. And you've got everything you need to attack these smallmouths in this sections of the river, south or downriver of Seneca Landing. Okay, I mean, you obviously use all these going upriver as well, but these are the most effective baits. Now, if the timing is right and you can get on them, the two crankbaits that I recommend the most are going to be crawl colored pattern crankbaits. It's just been my experience. They perform better than like sexy shad. Although in the fall, a bright chartreuse crankbait is money. But during the summertime, it's not. I don't know what it is. Sunlight conditions, just everything just may not be off. They're not on into it. It's crawl patterns. Okay, crawl pattern just like this. Beautiful coloration. Okay, Susquehanna killer, Upper Potomac killer. Okay, go with that. And then as you get pressed towards later in the summer, go with more of an auburn color. Okay, because their shells before molt are going to change. They're going to get a little bit darker. They'll get a little bit of red, okay, to them, but it's mostly like an orange red like that. You can kind of see that. But right now, your crawl look like this, okay, more or less like this, okay. So this, you can just work these up, especially the water's rising a little bit, and kind of keep these up in that square bill. And if the water gets back up a little bit, 3 feet, 4 feet, a little bit up, you can go with your, obviously change your diver a little bit and just kind of work it as best you can. And you're going to have real success with that. And then the other thing is probably goes back to like the Ned rigs. You obviously can go and you can buy whatever you want to buy. I would recommend you you hit up the custom bait makers, but if you're going to the store and you're looking for trailers and stuff, obviously the grub trailer, the beaver trailers are going to be really prevalent. A lot of guys for the grubs, you may have to look in the crappie area, to get the curly tail or, but I would say two things right now that I've really been doing, trying to work into the arsenal more, because I know this has worked on the Susky, and I'm getting some bites, a little bit more bites slowly as I've used it on the Upper Potomac, is the crawl trailers that you can get that are really small. Okay, these are older school ones. These are probably 10 years old. I'm not sure if they're still available or not. But something that looks along like these, adds a little bit of weight to your hair jig, works as like a Ned rig. It's just, it's just becoming a lot more effective with time the more I use it. Maybe that's because I'm very selective of when I use it. And then, of course, last but not least, the one bait right now, I consider this to be my search bait. And it's not a spy bait. It's not anything like that you would get from like a lot of largemouth channels. Swim bait, glide, like that. For just skinnier water, less than 3 feet of water or so, this is my go-to search bait. And it's simply just an underspin. Okay, and I'll change out, love this coloration right here, but I'll change out, the color pattern of the paddle tail based on what I'm seeing in the water, based on I know what's happening in my river system or the time of year or the depth of the water clarity, right? I just really love this coloration pattern, okay? It just works, okay? There's another one that's a lot more white, like ghost white on the belly, that's also extremely effective. And so basically it gives you a little bit more weight, gives you that flash in the water, in that clear water to like entice strikes. But then what I'll do is if I can catch 1 or 2 fish right away in an area off of this, I've dialed the area in that the smallmouth are there. And then maybe I may go in back through with a crankbait, or then maybe I may go back through with a jig or something else to get a bigger bite. Okay, that's kind of like how I use my search baits. Okay, whether it be on the Upper Potomac or be on the tidal Potomac, is I kind of use that to locate, and then I change my bait up. And if I change my bait up and it falls apart, then that's not the pattern. This is the pattern. The underspin is the pattern, and I'll grab a first generation underspin. And then I'll just have at them. And that ends up being the pattern. All right, mates. Hope you enjoyed part 2. please like and subscribe to the channel.